Hello everyone. The voice of fashion keeps asking questions no one asks. And as I often say in my introductions to interviews with designers and other stakeholders of the fashion industry, we must turn the flashlight inwards and ask questions to ourselves. 2 seasons back, when the Lakmé Fashion Week in collaboration with the Fashion Design Council of India took place in Delhi, the Voice of Fashion editorial team struggled to create content that was interesting, that was of relevance. One of the content pieces that we did create, besides a few reviews and shows to watch and not to watch, was a live editorial meeting recorded like this on video, where we asked each other what was the struggle, what wasn't really working at the Fashion Week and what was working. In that video conversation, we realized that deliberating on the content of the Fashion Week is as much our domain as it may be anybody else's. We are repeating the same exercise once again. This time, 3 of us attended the Lakmé Fashion Week in collaboration with FDCI at Mumbai's Geo World Gardens. My colleagues Sohini and Snigdha Ahuja were with me, and the 3 of us are here on this chat, on this video, taking forward our last conversation and asking each other, and hope to make this conversation relevant for you on how the media looks at fashion weeks, what we think, how we filter through the various inputs and information and gossip that comes our way, and are fashion weeks relevant? That's the essential question, or should they be reformatted? So I'd start with asking Sohini first. Sohini, should we discuss or talk about what you liked at Fashion Week?
I think there were a few shows that I certainly enjoyed. There was Antaragni's show on one of the days, which I thought was very interesting, not just because the clothes were well made, but also the fact that the choreography was unusual. It wasn't so much about scenography or anything else, but they sort of brought together an interesting choreography with clothes that were very nice, and that was an impressive show. I liked Akaro's show on day 1, which was Sustainable Fashion Day. It was a continuation of a show that he had already done in Delhi last year, yet he brought in new clothes. And here what worked for designer Gaurav Jai Gupta was the fact that not only were his textiles very beautifully made, they were also styled really well, which I think was done by Nikhil D. And in addition to that, I would also mention bodice. I did find the overall design language repetitive and continuing with something that designer Ruchika Sachdeva has been working on for a few years, yet the clothes were well made. They were well tailored and presented. And so those were collections that were interesting to watch.
Snigdha, can I ask you the same question? And if you can take it beyond just the shows, what else at Fashion Week did you like? It's not, after all, just a few designers showing.
For sure. I think even if I had to answer in the same vein, I think there were very similar shows that I think we all liked. Ujjwal's show, we liked Akaro, but I think beyond that, this was, I think, my 11th or 12th year of attending fashion shows. Mostly I've attended in Delhi, but also a few years. It's been a few years in Bombay. And I did think there was a sense of energy. It could be the venue, it could be the kind of people that were there. I did enjoy myself in parts, like we all, journalists also, we have to report, also to see the mood and to see the kind of guests, to see who's coming together, at the show and outside the show. So I think there was a sense of, people taking photographs. There were opportunities for street photography. We did it on our Instagram. We saw people who were dressed, in their own, they were wearing their personality, and that was great to see. So I think there was a sense of energy that I thought was missing, in the March edition of the Fashion Week. So I thought that was a sense of that's some evolution that we saw. And even in terms of attendance, there was a mix of, I saw a lot of people from the music industry. It could be a Bombay thing too. Maybe it's a very Delhi perspective. And of course, Bollywood was there. It was nice to see, like Anavila's show had a lot of people, not only attendees who would attend because they're invited, because they actually wear Anavila. So people like Konkana Sen, we don't usually see at such events. So it was nice to see that.
when I plan for Fashion Week or when I'm packing my 2.5 bags and shoes from Delhi to go to Bombay, I feel a sense of fatigue. But that is not what struck me when I actually reached there and when I looked around. Having watched Fashion Week so many more years, perhaps then the two of you, I do find that the wannabe is gone. The wannabe bystander is gone because fashion has become so incestuous. It has become so much of a community that there are many, they may be fake insiders, but there are more insiders than wannabes. So at one point of time, I remember long queues, curious, serious, people of different pursuits, and some only wannabes. Wow, because it's fashion, we need to get there. Fashion has lost that magic wand. Of course, we all know Instagram, everybody dressing up, democracy of photography and all that. Some is the loss of charm, the loss of the aura of the industry itself and what it promises. And that's why I miss the wannabe. What I see is a freer individual who is more fashionable than wannabe, more comfortable in the skin or scheme, more adept at using both the eyeliner and the bra or the lack of it. And that crowd that I see at Fashion Week engages me, and I saw it a lot more in gender fluid male personas, more men than women. And Snigdha, you did this story called The Boys of Fashion Week. So some of those memes, emerging memes and emerging tropes of contemporary society is something that I could observe, and that was giving me the feeling that fashion is a space to spot those. The question that I want to ask you, and I'm going to feed into this myself, is, do you think we react with bias, with a certain media bias, and what are those biases?
I think as journalists, there are certain shows that we pay more attention to than others. And I'm sure the kind of bias we have will also change from person to person and publication to publication. For instance, we don't feature a lot of bridal wear. We also don't feature many celebrities unless it is a specific kind of story. Yet this season, when I was attending one of the shows which had Abhishek Sharma and Ritika Mirchandani, it was a packed show. And they were outfits that you would wear to a wedding, perhaps your own wedding, someone else's wedding, highly embellished, or at best they could be seen as Indian cocktail or westernized couture, but with very Indian artisanal work. So extremely elaborate, certainly not the kind of stories that we may immediately do, but you could see the appreciation all around because there was clearly an audience watching it and admiring it, because I could literally hear people sit next to me who were pointing out the outfits and saying that they liked it. So there is certainly that. Of course, there are other publications that also cover these, ad nauseum perhaps. But that was certainly something that it's not as if we don't cover Indian wear, we certainly do, and a lot of it. And we also cover occasion wear, but I think because of the way we sort of, even like tilt in our editorial mandates, we perhaps don't necessarily pay attention to glamour just for glamour's sake, and something that is without perhaps any very cerebral ideas of textiles or embellishment or even concept going into it, which is just beautiful, perhaps glamorous clothing that is being made to clothe what looks like a very big audience. So that is certainly one thing.
I locate biases definitely in myself. And for instance, shows like this time there were shows like Nirmoha, Anu's Creations, Limerick, a few others. We don't even pay attention. We don't watch closely enough to be able to report. And then I, guilt myself on this. And then I start watching on YouTube or wherever they are available to kind of brush up my homework, saying I have no business then to write a composite idea of fashion if I'm not watching these. But why don't I carry myself to these shows physically, be seated there and see what is going on? So that's where my bias comes in. But you'll always see me at a Tarun Telyani show or at a Gaurav Jay Gupta show, or as we are saying, Ujjwal Dubey's show. There is something here that needs to be tackled, and that bias must be owned up and put out to our readers. So, Snigdha, if I were to ask you, how do we fix this bias? What would you say?
I think first I'll also have to locate my own bias to answer that. And I think I have a similar problem. I mean, often I dismiss shows as day shows or afternoon shows, and I would rather take that time to report something else on ground and not attend at all if I have the option. And I think that sort of puts me behind, because I know, for example, a 2.2, at some point they must be showing in that slot, or some other brands that we have come to appreciate. We have an entire generation future category that we write on. So how will we find out what works unless we see how they're performing on the runway? If they're able to put on a show with a sponsor, without a sponsor, that also shows their business acumen or their ability to, catch eyeballs. So I think that bias is there, and that's something that I need to correct. Second is that I know there were times that there would be a very important influencer or content creator who would be there at the event, and you would see photographers flocking, to catch them. Even some celebrities that would be television celebrities or celebrities who come on OTT, or they're just popular on Instagram for their following and not particularly for, what they do on screen. And I remember thinking, why are the photographers even there? Who's this? And then I have to correct myself and tell myself that that's my problem. I am a journalist. I'm supposed to know who this person is. If 20 people know them, I should also know. So I think these are some biases that I to correct. And I think these are I mean, the more we it's rather than ranting about which I have, I'm not going to name the publications, but I have seen a lot of some criticism about the Fashion Week. And of course, fashion and design, it has to evolve. As you said, wedding wear, it becomes so fatigued that you don't know what to write about. You don't know how the consumers what they should, what they should learn from, where do they get inspired from. But there are I think the only way to get over bias is to educate yourself. So we as journalists at least need to be more open-minded when it comes to these shows. When it comes to even if they have a celebrity showstopper, we have to remember it might be a sponsor mandate. They might not get a show unless they get a celebrity showstopper. Since we know the insides of all of these information, I think we can be more open-minded to say that it's a 12 p.m. show, but I will attend it. So it's a self-correction. And I think if one publication does it, maybe the other publications would follow.
I think some publications do make a choice in their favor and make it a point to attend this. And I do not necessarily agree that there is a sponsor mandate. At least I do not have insider information on everything. But I think that designers themselves make the choice of bringing in Bollywood stars as it is a shortcut. So we have talked about this before. It's a vicious circle. Several designers allege that media only pays attention or attends, or audiences fill up when there is a promise of a Bollywood star. That is one. Sometimes it's the sponsor's mandate. And so it's a shifting little packet that goes, it's passing the parcel, but everybody owns it. I think designers make an active choice of bringing in Bollywood. And those who will, if they were to stand up against this and say collectively, or even half of them or four of them, that hame Bollywood stars nahi chahiye, Fashion Weeks would pay attention. If we were invited to offer suggestions on how Fashion Weeks can be reformatted, what, Sohini, do you think? You talk passionately about good and bad design, good and not so good design. Do you think that would be one of the prisms to reformat? And that means better curation?
Yeah. I think one of the ways to certainly make Fashion Weeks evolve is to have very solid curation and think very differently from how fashion is still a very young industry in India. Fashion Weeks are a little more than 20 years old here. But in that time, a lot has changed internationally, and we can also feel that impact because there's digitization, technology is making an impact. It's really opening our world. And one of the things that I think, and that also comes across in the media coverage that is done, we're not talking about celebrities here, but generally the sense of fatigue that sort of comes, there's a repeated observation that the designs don't make their mark beyond certain shows that everyone seems to, have in common that they like. So I think perhaps we need to look both ways, from a designer's perspective as well as from organizers. Organizers can perhaps curate better. They can put more autonomy on the hands of the designers to sort of like present their shows in a certain way, and certainly look at maybe beyond the usual suspects. I think we do see new designers every season at Fashion Week. Perhaps we need to push even further, in the sense that a lot of the new designers are those who will bring in crowds because they already at this point have Instagram credibility, they have fans there, so people are coming. But there are a lot of brands that don't perhaps even have that, but still have cutting edge designs, and bringing that to the runway will bring something new to the space. And also from, I think, the designer's perspective, they need to work, many of them need to certainly rethink the way they conceptualize collections. A lot of, like I said, there were good designs, but a lot of it was repetitive. It was like watching something that was 2 collections old.
Yeah.
So that does not really inspire an audience of critics or buyers or anything beyond a certain point. So try and maybe use your signatures, do something new. But, also give an experience that lives up to the fact that, it's a real lived physical experience that you're watching. Social media and technology should be able to eclipse that.
Yeah. I see a lot of, it's a big soup, the Fashion Week curation, and it tries to bring in, perhaps deliberately, different kinds of design impetus and influences. So there is an ether, which has been called specifically for a certain reason, or so I presume. Then there is a Tarun Tehliani, then there is an Anavila. Now, if there is going to be a soup and there's going to be resort wear and athleisure and out and out glamour and so-called sustainability, without anybody telling or disclaiming to the world, why is this sustainable? Just because it is craftsy, or it's made from a crafts culture or artisanship, it does not necessarily make it sustainable. And if it does make it, why does that day reject several other designers by declaring in terms of rejection that वो sustainable नहीं है, only these are sustainable? So I personally see that one way to reformat the Fashion Week is to actually divide the 3 or 4 days into couture or whatever it is, luxury, breadth, diffusion. Another day for crafts, artisanship, sustainability, culture, and loosen it out of the sustainability definition. I definitely have a problem with that because we don't have enough information. So if it was called crafts-based, artisan-based, handmade, sustainable together in a nice word, it would be a more embracing conceptual way to put those things. Then have one day for Bollywood glamour, disco night, etc. and club it like that. And there might then work with choreographers, stylists, music personalities to then give those days their coding and their different personalities and make those 4 days distinctive. Snigdha, what do you think? And also tell me, how did you feel about the hair and makeup? I thought hair was very interesting at Lakmé Fashion Week this time.
Yeah, I think we had some very interesting looks. And I remember we were both together at Anavila and we were thinking that there's something different here. And the muddy feet, the Dabu print was, since the mud resistant technique was in focus. So there were some connectors there. Yeah, I think that was an aspect which was great to see. And it also, because, fashion is about, it's all about the visuals, and those are the photographs that reach our social media feeds, as to say. So yeah, it was, there were some shows that stood out in that sense. What I feel about, what you were saying about better, putting it in specific categories.
Categorization.
Yeah, not in terms of pret or couture, but more in terms of the themes and the subjects, and maybe the market and the market value, that will also make it more focused for the audience that wants to attend on certain days and not make it a mishmash. I also, for the lack of a better word, I also think better cataloging, in the sense that sometimes you watch a show and you don't understand what it was about, because Fashion Week is actually, it's also a bit of a performance. So like our Instagrams are performative, so a Fashion Week. So if runway shows, since we spoke about Ujjwal's show, the Antaragni show, the clothes were beautiful, the choreography made you think, but it was a performance by the end of it. And some people really liked that performance. It did not photograph very wonderfully. I gave that feedback. Because you couldn't understand what was the rush, why the models were walking very quickly. But if you see the clothes up close, if you go to the stall or if you ask him to see the clothes up close, that's when you can see the surface works, the texturing, the pleating, what he works with, and there's so much detail. But from a first row, second row, third row, what you can see is whites and great cuts and great silhouettes. So if there's an area, or if there is a way, there's a digital cataloging of designs that one can download or one can see immediately. We know that we have access to technology. We have done digital fashion weeks with Sina by now concepts. We continue to do scenography and sets which have technology as a very important part of the show. So we have to find a way to make it more hybrid. We don't have to perhaps have a 4-day fashion week, and we can find connectors. We have experts who work with technology, where a person who's not who loves to see the performance, but also see the work that has gone into it, as a journalist, as a buyer, as an audience, I think that would be great.
I'm waiting to see if the title sponsor or one of the major sponsors would do the last show, the finale, with 2 very well selected Gen Next designers. And then they turn around the Gen Next branding. Instead of being the first show, they make it the finale. But then they have to really work hard on selecting those 2 finalists who become the finalists, literally, and then segue into the industry.